Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And if you sign up to leavemeansleave.eu, there's another 4 of those piffle videos over the coming 3 or 4 weeks. They're a bit of fun, but actually they tell a very serious message. My name's Richard Tice. I'm the founder of Leave Means Leave, which somewhat naively I created just after the referendum, thinking that maybe for 6 months or so, it might be useful to have a campaign for a proper Brexit to support the government. Here we are, over 2 years later, and counting. And it's fair to say that things have not gone as we would have hoped. They haven't gone very well at all. And I think many people are here in the same way that we've recently held 2 massive rallies, one at Bolton 8 days ago for 1,700 people. We had one yesterday at Solihull for about 900 people. And people really are expressing their huge disappointment with where we are today and where we need to go. And the cri de coeur, is we need to chuck Chequers. And now, if you haven't been to one of these rallies, the good news is there's at least another 4 before Christmas. Jacob is appearing in Torquay, just a few miles down the road, on the 13th of October. There are still a few tickets for that, but they are going fast. Unlike this event, where, of course, it's for free because it's the Conservative Party, we charge the modest fee of £5. We're a cross-party and no-party campaign group. So it was great yesterday to have a passionate, deeply socialist speaker, a wonderful councillor from Ashford, and he greeted the audience of 900 comrades. If I was ever going to vote Labour, he actually is the sort of guy that could persuade me. But actually what he understands, seriously, is that a proper Brexit will benefit the least well off the most. And, you know, those of us Brexiteers really understand this key point. And we're so lucky today to have 2 fantastic speakers in Jacob Rees-Mogg and Tim Martin to speak to us for about 10 minutes each or so that we've then got plenty of time for some Q&A that our chairman, John Longworth, is going to lead. I think most of us in business, we understand the simple expression, no deal is always better than a bad deal. That was our original slogan of Leave Means Leave. I think we also understand no deal, no problem. That's the reality. And we need to get that message to certain key people in Number 10 and the Cabinet, so that they have the confidence, the same confidence that actually millions of people up and down the country have in the greatness of our nation. It's interesting, isn't it? Both Jacob and Tim are fine entrepreneurs. They've created and led businesses, as have John Longworth and myself. We know what it's like to look at cash flows. We know what it's like to deal in risk and reward. And we've got the confidence that actually no deal, no problem. So, it's a great pleasure. I'm going to ask Jacob, first of all, to come and speak to us and entertain us in his usual delightful way. He needs little introduction. He is, of course, as you would expect from someone of such a contemporary mind, he's a rising star in social media. I'm not sure whether he's got 200,000 or more Twitter followers in just a matter of a few months. The Mogcasts are, you know, a wonderful, joyous video. And he does hold the record in the House of Commons for using the longest word ever used so far. 29 letters. He may entertain us with it later. So, Jacob, over to you.
Well, Richard, first of all, thank you very much, and thank you for founding Leave Means Leave. And what a great pleasure it is for me to be once again sharing a platform with Tim. The last time we were together was at the opening of a pub in my constituency, and I was very flattered when Richard compared my modest entrepreneurial efforts to Tim's. His are over 900 pubs, which is quite an achievement compared to my modest business. So the real entrepreneur is Tim and not me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. To those of you who I overtook in the queue, my apologies for queue barging. I've always thought it's very un-English to push ahead to the front of the queue, so you're all very kind to let me come in and allow us to start actually a few minutes early. But I think leave means leave is very important because Richard realised something that I'm afraid most of us Eurosceptics didn't realise after the 23rd of June 2016. We thought we had won the referendum and that this being the great democratic country that it is, that the referendum result would therefore be implemented and there was no need for further campaigning. But what actually happened was that the people who lost the referendum, who frankly didn't seem to care very much during the referendum, they just assumed arrogantly that they would win and were rather surprised when people didn't do what they were told by their betters, decided that that was the point to start campaigning and ramooning. And leave means leave has filled the gap and made sure that there is some campaign effort. So we remember why leaving is actually a good thing to do. Why do we want to leave? Why do we want to take back control? Well, let's start at the beginning. We want to govern ourselves. It is as simple as that. We, ladies and gentlemen, believe in democracy, and the European Union does not. And they admit it, actually. I did a very interesting meeting with some people from the European Union, and I was saying that we'd all voted to leave because we believed in democracy, because what we wanted was control of our own affairs. And one of the people present said to me, but doesn't democracy have to be controlled? Now, that is the antithesis of what we think. We think that individuals coming together as families and to society create the best form of government, that democratic accountability makes government better. Why? Because it can be criticised, it can have its mistakes pointed out to it, and it is more flexible and open to change. It was Douglas Jay who famously said, as a Labour cabinet minister in 1947, the truth is the man in Whitehall really does know best. Now, as a Labour member, he would probably say the person in Whitehall because he would want to be more politically correct. But that's the only updating really that the pro-Europeans have. They would use the politically correct language, but ultimately they believe they know best about how our lives should be run, and we do not. And so taking back control is essential and good, and it will make us all better off. How can I argue that so confidently when the Treasury, the Bank of England, the IMF, the OECD, any other jumble of initials tells us that we will be worse off, we will be ruined and a plague of frogs will come upon us? How can I so confidently say that they are wrong? Because we know from history that countries that have the rule of law and democratic accountability are more prosperous than those that do not. It is something that we have led the way in, and the United States has led the way in, to show how real prosperity exists. Those countries led by corrupt bureaucracies always have low economic growth and lower economic growth, and you see that with the euro. You see the failure of the European Union's economic model. Now, I make no pretense about being the most modern person in the world. Indeed, I should be offended if I were thought to be modern. And I will confess that my father always thought the word modern was a swear word. But on this occasion, I think we are the modern ones, because we recognise that the future is outside the closed fortress European model. It is looking to the wider world. Richard said, or the little programme said, sponsored I think by Rank Screen Advertising, said that 93% of the population live outside the European Union. So what are we fussing about with the 7% of the population within the European Union? Our opportunities are global, and that should be really exciting for us, whereas the European Union is a timorous, cautious, nervous organisation that is worried that its privileges will be under attack and therefore builds a fortress to protect itself against the competition from the rest of the world, and we are against this. But we're also against it because the European Union is a project of vested interests. I speak as somebody who set up a business. And I should now actually be jolly keen on all the regulations that come from the European Union, the MiFID IIs and such like. Why? Because it makes it much harder for anybody else to set up to compete with you once you are an incumbent. But if I go back to 2007 and think, could I set up a business now under the current rules? I would find it much, much harder. I would need more capital, I would need a greater scope of investors, I would need a greater number of people many of whom would not actually be earning revenue for the business, but would be there organising compliance. To no benefit of clients, simply to extra cost and reducing business. And the same is true across the whole approach of the European Union. It is for incumbents and it is against challengers. But as Richard said, if you have a vibrant economy, you help the least well off the most. Because the EU protects the producer against the consumer. That's what all the tariffs are about. The tariffs are about creating a cosy arrangement for producers who have thousands of lobbyists in Brussels, and not for the individual consumer. That's why when we leave, I want us to get rid of tariffs on food, clothing and footwear, on such as we do not produce straight away. There is no reason to protect inefficient continental businesses once we've left the European Union, and we should look to withdraw tariffs on things that are created in the United Kingdom over a reasonable timescale to allow businesses to adapt to the changing conditions. Why? Because this helps consumers, it improves people's standard of living. But the other key thing to improving standards of living is dealing with the free movement of people. Because the free movement of people has hurt the least well off the most. Why is that? Well, it's because if you are unskilled, then really the only thing on which you compete is price. And there are two ways of that price being raised. One is by reducing the supply, and the other is by government fiat in setting minimum wages. That's why minimum wages have come in and have been increased to try and deal with this problem. But actually, for some businesses, it's been easy. They haven't needed to innovate or automate or to invest. They've just been able to call upon a large pool of unskilled labour to come over to keep prices down for the least well-off in our society. We want to change that, but not only change it so that the unskilled get paid more, but so that their opportunities to have better jobs are improved, because businesses will have the incentive to train them rather than drawing on this pool from overseas, and will have the incentive to automate, ensuring that the jobs they are doing are better jobs anyway. That's one of the really exciting opportunities of Brexit. So when Richard says it's the least well-off who will do best from Brexit, that is true. Free markets and enterprise will help them, and preventing mass movement of unskilled labour will ensure the value of their labour rises. And that will help automation, which will make our economy more productive. It's a very exciting prospect. And we are almost there. And how best should we get there? Well, you'll be reassured to know that I haven't in the last few hours suddenly come to the conclusion that Chequers is marvellous. Because the more I think about Chequers, the more rotten I know it is. It is not... It is not leaving the European Union, it is vassalage. It is being tied down by the European Union and giving us inflexibility, meaning that we are still governed by their rules in terms of goods and agri-foods, and that we have no say in those rules, and that the European Union's highest court, the European Court of Justice, or the Court of Justice of the European Union, if you wish to call it that, will be the ultimate arbiter, and we will have no say. And our only ability not to do that could lead to us being penalised. Penalised by an organisation to which we no longer belong. It's a completely outrageous proposition. It's worse than what we have in terms of penalties at the moment. The penalties could be higher than if we didn't implement an EU directive now as a member state. This is exactly what the Prime Minister said she would not do at Lancaster House. At Lancaster House... No. Certainly not. I'm said again and again, but thank you, I always like a bit of robust heckling. It's very British. We like robust meetings. But we need to change the policy, and we need to persuade the Prime Minister to evolve her position, because that's the Downing Street word. We like evolution. And in evolution, I have a nasty feeling that the Chequers plan is the missing link. But but that we want it to evolve back to Lancaster House, where the Prime Minister said so clearly we must not be half in and half out, because it's in leaving properly that the opportunities are there. But I would be happy to have a deal. I would be happy to have a Canada-style free trade deal, as long as it does not divide the United Kingdom. I should make it absolutely clear, and I'm sure many of you agree, thank you, some of you agree with me, let us say this again and again. Northern Ireland is much a part of the United Kingdom as Somerset. You may prefer me to say Birmingham. But my country is the United Kingdom. And if I ever inadvertently say Great Britain by mistake, I get told off by Kate Hoey, and quite right too, because our country is the United Kingdom, an indivisible kingdom, and every part of it is valued and as integral as the other. But we can do that. The ERG set out in a paper how we could do that to meet the terms of the European Union, to meet its concerns over the integrity of the single market. And that is what we want the government to change towards. And it is fascinating here at this Tory party conference how much support there is for a super Canada style deal. It is what people want. It's what the nation want. It is within the bounds of what we voted for. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. It is terrific to see such numbers. It is wonderful that Leave Means Leave is gaining such support across the country at the rallies it's holding in various parts of our nation, because we know that the 17.4 million people who voted to leave still want to leave. The 2.8 million people who voted for the first time in their lives in that great referendum because they thought it really mattered, because they thought they could change their country. They thought that for once the politicians would do what they said they would do. We must deliver for them. You are the people who will be the forefront of making sure this happens. Thank you very much for doing it, and thank you for your support.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. What rousing applause, which reflects quality and leadership. For our second speaker, we've got another fine entrepreneur. And it was great earlier this afternoon, as part of our relaunching the Leave campaign, we have, of course, it's essential, isn't it, in every campaign, to have a battle bus. So yes, there's a new battle bus, and it's got all sorts of things on the side. We had great fun deciding how big the number should be on the side of the bus. I wanted to put, save 39 billion. But I was actually outvoted. And of course, I believe in democracy, unlike some people. Anyway, the great thing was the bus this afternoon was outside one of Tim's 900 pubs directly opposite. And he has been an incredible supporter of Brexit. In every possible way. He's now designing new menus, Brexit menus. He's sourcing, bless him, he's finding wines and spirits from parts of the world I've never heard of. He's a true supporter of Brexit. We're very lucky to have him to give us some of his time, his valuable time here this evening. Please give a warm welcome, Tim Martin.
Thanks very much, Richard. Thanks to everyone for coming along. Fantastic speech by Jacob, and an excellent couple of videos. I'm not going to try and repeat the things that have been said there, but I think there's one point. Well, I think I'll have to crouch down actually rather than speak up. But there's one thing that surprised me a lot in all this debate, in that having studied a bit of history at school like everyone here did, I came away with the strong feeling that if you could make the world democratic, with everyone getting a vote over 17, 18, whatever you like, male and female, you would almost reduce the possibility of war to zero. Australia isn't going to invade New Zealand or vice versa. They don't need armies, and nor would we need them against France or Germany, so long as they remain democratic. But what surprised me so much in the last few years is the extent to which a lot of highly intelligent people have drawn a different conclusion. They've thought that to avoid trouble in the world, you've got to take away democratic power and give it to people who haven't been elected in Brussels or perhaps elsewhere. And I think it comes from a fear of the public, a feeling that if you cede power to other people like us, highly educated people like us, then we'll be better off. But it's such a dangerous way to go about things. And you can see in the EU how this is happening with 5 unelected presidents. Hardly anyone in the UK understood that. A court which isn't subject to parliamentary democratic control, and MPs, so-called MPs, who can't even initiate legislation. So it's a mock democracy, and it's fantastically dangerous. And you can see it already in the economic situation in countries like Greece and Spain, and also the turmoil within the countries where people feel they've lost their power and are becoming extreme and angry. So the lesson surely is, from what we know happened in Europe over the last couple of 100 years, not that you need to give power away to people who haven't been elected, but that you should trust the public and have the people in your parliament making decisions, and they won't go around fighting between European countries. Wars in Europe have come from dictatorships, and that's true, I'm sure, if you look at the rest of the world. But there's been a great fear as well of no deal. You'll have read it in the paper, cliff edges, more cliff edges than the Cornish coast path. And everyone's extremely frightened of this. And again, the source of the fear are the very highly educated people, I'm sorry to say. So it's the CBI, representing British industry. It's been bolstered by the Treasury, our own Treasury, and it's all completely wrong. And I think that the fact is that no deal, what it immediately means we can do, and this point's been made already, but tariffs are invisible. A lot of people don't realize that when you buy rice, when you buy oranges, when you buy bananas, you are paying a tariff. And the tariff is collected by the UK government. Now, in the last week or two, lots of top economists have got this wrong. They say, yeah, we're going to lose the income from the tariffs. No, you won't, because the tariffs go to so you can eliminate, how no-brainer an issue is this? You eliminate tariffs, the price of New Zealand's Sauvignon Blanc, which is the most important thing, goes down, along with 12,651 other tariffs, and the government doesn't lose any income. So spending power in the economy increases, and that can happen on the 1st of, well, I shouldn't say the 1st of April, the 31st of March. We can regain control of our fishing. I've never heard, a lot of fishing communities have been devastated. If we have 39 billion to invest and giving it to the EU, instead of doing that, we can invest it in this country. And that's a sort of shot in the arm that would be very useful if you're worried that the ports are going to seize up and the whole of Kent's going to become a lorry park. So the key thing, if you've bought a house or you started a business, is to do the things that you can do without the agreement of anyone else. So eliminate the tariffs, or most of them, do it in a sensible way, and free up the fishing, and invest the 39 billion in this country. That's a starting moves, and there's lots of other stuff that you can be done. The great tragedy, I think, of the recent months and years is that instead of prioritizing leaving, that's what it said on the referendum ticket, instead of prioritizing leaving, what's happened is everyone, or a few people, have prioritized a deal. So you know what it's like. If you want to go up to someone and say, I want to buy your house, I must have it at any cost. I can't live without your house. You're stuffed, aren't you? You're going to pay the price of Buckingham Palace for a terraced house down the road. So that's what's happened. Instead of prioritizing leaving, it's all about, I'm sure we can get a deal if I'm really nice, if I posture, if I pontificate with Mr. Juncker. So the main thing I've noticed in my business, where I actually did a little experiment, is that all EU products can be replaced. From the 93% of the world we've heard that isn't. And I did a little experiment in our own business with French champagne. We've been selling it for 35 years. I said, if the ports are going to seize up, let's see what we can buy so that it doesn't have to come across the channel. You know, forgetting the fact that people have been doing that for a couple of thousand years. And so we got English champagne, sparkling wine, no Ritz, please. and Aussie sparkling wine. People think the Aussies are all sledging and iron ore, but they actually produce very good sparkling wine as well. And so I won't rattle on, but we've done the same thing, and I'm not trying to advertise our stuff, but I mean, I don't mind doing that if it happens. But French brandy is very good, and I sort of feel sorry for French suppliers in a way, and European suppliers, because they're caught up in this system as well. But the number one brandy in Australia, which outsells Courvoisier and Hennessy, is an extremely good brandy. If you do it on a blind taste, it'll score very well. Good, very good American brandies as well. So that's what we're introducing. And that's what everyone can do. Everything you buy from the EU can be bought from the rest of the world. We don't want to do that. We want to be friendly, but the power lies with the consumer. It doesn't really matter what the consumer... If you lot say, and the British people say, we don't like this, we've not been treated fairly, we're not going to buy any BMWs, I can guarantee you, you won't have to pay 39 billion quid to old Juncker, you know? It's very... I won't waffle on, but I just think that this most important thing is to realize that democracy has always equaled its economic steroids, and it's equaled far more peace, and it's equaled prosperity and freedom. Look at South Korea versus North. Look at what happened to Japan in 2 or 3 decades after it became a democracy. It was the second biggest economy in the world. So long as you stand back and look at the big picture and don't get caught up with how are we going to get the EU products across to Britain, and there's going to be lorry jams on the N3 or whatever the heck it is, then it's if you concentrate on the big picture, you know that democracy is right, and that's what Brexit should and must give us. And then we want to be friends with the Europeans. We don't much like old Juncker, but he's probably all right. He's just in the wrong system. And that's it. So thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to take a few questions now. Just to support what Tim's said, by the way, because we're all business people on this panel, it's a complete myth that business does not support Brexit. There are 4,300,000 privately owned businesses in the UK. There are only 2,500 multinationals who are members of the CBI. We had 200 entrepreneurs write to the Telegraph only a few days ago, saying that they absolutely support a no-deal Brexit. there are hundreds of supporters of Leave Means Leave who run businesses who support that view. So don't think for a minute that business doesn't support Brexit. Entrepreneurs and business owners do, multinationals don't, because it's inconvenient for them. It'll be inconvenient for a few weeks, but we're talking about the future of the UK forevermore. You've got to balance those two things. Tariffs in the UK, ranging from trainers and flat-screen TVs through to food, range from 20% to 70%. They're huge. The reduction in the cost of living and the increase in buying power in the UK that would result from the removal of tariffs is enormous. Don't listen to the Remainers who tell you that actually tariffs will be an increase in the cost. And one final thing I just wanted to say, because you can see that the speakers have inspired me to share this with you. When I was Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce, before I resigned from that position, when I was just simply the Director General and I wasn't doing the debates on Brexit or campaigning to leave the EU, I went to Brussels to do a debate on the future of the European Union. And this was January 2016. And the room was full entirely of senior officials of the European Union. And I gave my presentation and I asked for questions. And the first hand that went up was from a very senior official in the European Commission. And the thing he said was this, and this is one of the things that influenced my decision to resign and campaign, because I couldn't believe what he said. He said, "Are you really going to allow people who haven't got a degree to vote in a referendum?" That was the attitude of the European Commission to democracy. And he was not the only person in the room that believed that people who were uneducated, as he put it, should be allowed to make decisions. That's the organisation that we're dealing with. So let me ask, who would like to ask a question? Front row first, madam.
Hi, Mr. Rees-Mogg, you talked about the man in Whitehall. I'd like your opinion as to whether it's the politician in Whitehall or the civil servant in Whitehall that's causing the most trouble.
I'll repeat the question, which was, do I think it's the civil servant or the politician who is creating the greatest problem? In my view, Margaret Thatcher got it right, as so often. Advisors advise and ministers decide. And we should never, as politicians, hide behind the skirts of civil servants. I have never criticised Mr. Oliver Robbins. He is doing the job he is given to do by Her Majesty's government. And if the policy is to be changed, the civil service will, I'm sure, implement it. And the policy is determined by the Cabinet.
Okay, this gentleman here with the red tie.
Hi, my name is Patrick Houston. I have a question for Mr. Martin. So I'm an ex-Campbellian, the same as yourself, and as I'm sure a lot of the people in this room have spent a lot of time in your pubs this week. So obviously it's a great place to spend time. So in your menus, you've a lot of information on the tariffs and the reduction in tariffs going on. What do you see the difference being in terms of the regulations going on surrounding your human resources and how basically the reduction in EU regulation inside the workplace is going to have on your business?
I think the question that I'm asked is, how do I perceive the effect of reducing regulations from the EU on our business? I think that one of the great difficulties with the EU is it's very difficult to know where British law ends and EU law begins. And everyone has a lot of difficulty with this, even ministers and MPs trying to work out who does what. But I think the big difference is that if I go and knock on Jacob's door as my MP or go to Parliament to see some MPs, which you can actually do, then they decide. Whereas at the moment, if you go to Parliament and say, I feel VAT for pubs should be reduced, it's extremely difficult because often you get told, well, this is an EU regulation, so you've got to go and lobby the EU Parliament, which is almost an impossible task. And that's where people feel democracy is being reduced. Not only did you go to the same school as me, Patrick Houston, if that's what your name is, my brother is Gerald Patrick Houston, so that's an extraordinary coincidence. But you're better looking than he is.
See, somebody at the back. Gentleman over there in the centre, yes.
Jacob, I will ask the question that is pressing everyone's minds. If Chequers doesn't change, there will be a leadership election for the Conservative Party within the next 9 months. Now, let not this question be a flocky knocking a hill pillification, but please answer us. Will you run?
I am not a... I am not a believer in the floxy knocking a hilipilification of generous questioners, nor am I an anti-disestablishmentarianist. But having used the 2 longest words in the English language, other than obscure diseases that I can't pronounce, and railway stations in Wales, I think that we should back the Prime Minister. I think that we need the policy changed. I know, but look, I know, and I understand why there is concern, but the truth is there is a very small majority for the Conservatives with the DUP, and it would be very hard for anybody to push through a really ambitious Brexit policy at this stage. I think what we need is to move to Super Canada, and that will ultimately command a majority in the House of Commons, and I think it can win favour with the European Union, as long as we can sort out the issue relating how charming. We're having dancing later. It's strictly come dancing, and I shall do the comparing rather than the actual dancing. I'll leave that to my wife. I thought you'd be grateful. This is absolutely delightful. Is this coming through the microphone? Why don't I give up on the microphone and perhaps the music will go away? But the truth is, with such a small majority, there is no way anybody else could do anything very much different. But we could get Chequers gone, keep Mrs May, and move to Super Canada. That is my answer.
My name is Paul Siddall. I'm in UKIP. I want to ask the question, if God forbid we adopted the Chequers deal, would that exclude us from having a free trade deal with America and other parts of the world? I'm not sure about that. Maybe Mr. Rees-Mogg can answer.
You can still use the mics, by the way, but the question was, if we adopt the Chequers deal, would it preclude us from having a deal with countries like America?
If we have Chequers, the prospects of free trade deals declines dramatically. Because what we want in free trade deals is free trade for our services. You want the microphone? You think the microphone's better in spite of the background music? Which, is it coming from outside?
I think it's saboteurs, Jacob. I think it's
I see.
anti-Brexiteers.
Are there such people? Right. Oh, I see. Well, I thought they were just cheerful souls having music outside. No, the real danger... Well, let the message go out from this great hall. Anything they can do, we can do louder. But yes, to answer the question, Chequers makes trade deals much harder because we want to change regulations to give equivalence to regulations from other mature countries. So if you take the REACH regulations for chemicals, under the Canada deal that the EU has signed, we don't accept that Canadian chemicals are safe. They still have to register under REACH regulations. This is ridiculous, and it's a constraint on trade, and it's a protectionist measure. What we want to do is sign trade deals where we say, look, Canada is a serious country, it regulates properly, and therefore we will recognise the safety of their chemicals. That's the intelligent route to take, and is made much, much harder by Chequers. So are trade deals impossible? No. Would they be any good? No.
It's all right. So I can get somebody else at the back. Lady here with the blue lanyard. Oh, sorry, I'll get there in a minute.
My question is, have our honourable Eurosceptic members trusted the Prime Minister too much? Over the last 6 months, the fable of the scorpion and the frog comes to mind, and I'm sure Jacob would know what that fable means.
So the question is, have our government trusted the European negotiators too much?
Our honourable Eurosceptic members trusted the Prime Minister.
Ah, right.
too
Okay.
much. And the fable of the scorpion,
Yeah, scorpion and the frog.
comes to mind.
I do recall the fable of the scorpion and the frog, among with many other of Aesop's fables, good and instructive work that it is, and I shall give a brief lecture on it tomorrow. But no, I think you have to look at what was our priority until June. My overwhelming concern until June was that the withdrawal bill became an act of Parliament, and therefore in the absence of further legislation we should leave on the 29th of March next year. Up until that bill was through, it would have been catastrophic if we had had any resignations, or if it had been people like me and the European Research Group causing trouble. We were the ones backing the government to get the bill through, and the rebels within the Conservative Party were not us. Since then, we got Chequers, which we have robustly opposed because we don't think it's leaving the European Union. But do I trust the Prime Minister? Yes, of course I do. I think all loyal Conservatives ought to trust the leader of the party. I think it would be dishonourable for me not to trust her. I think if I did that, I should start writing letters, and I have no intention of writing any letters of that kind. I write a lot of other letters, but not of that kind.
Okay. There was a lady here. There was a lady here that I missed the first time with the lanyard.
Good evening. I also have a question for Jacob. Can you hear me? No. Oh, okay. I'll just shout if I may. I also very much feel intuitively that I would like to trust the Prime Minister. But the feeling I have this week, or the last 2 days, shall we say, listening to Cabinet Minister after Cabinet Minister in the Great Hall talking about uniting and backing the Prime Minister, and that the Chequers is the deal on the table, although they don't necessarily use the word Chequers, they talk about the current deal. The feeling I get is that she's not listening. And it feels like the election that a lot of us didn't want all over again. You know, so do we really think that she is going to listen?
Jacob's got his views on this, but I always recall the question that was asked of Elizabeth Taylor, which was how far did she trust Richard Burton? And she said, as far as I can throw a piano. Jacob asked me to make a little joke so he had time to think.
For the record, and the journalists in the room, that is not my answer. No, look, I think it's really interesting what Cabinet Ministers, including the Prime Minister, are saying, and you need to listen very carefully to what they're saying, including the Chancellor this morning on the Today programme. And first of all, may I commend you actually for going into the conference hall, that I'm not sure as many people are going in as should, so it's much to be encouraged that people should go there and listen attentively. But what the Chancellor said this morning was that a Canada-style deal didn't work because of Northern Ireland. That is the only obstacle that the government is putting up to Super Canada, Canada Plus, Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious Canada, whatever you want to call it. The only obstacle is the Northern Ireland question, or the Irish question. And I think that's really important because there is a proposal the ERG has put forward to solve that. I think it may well need further discussion and negotiation with the European Union, but it's the basis for sorting out the Irish question, in which case all the cabinet ministers that I can think of who have spoken have actually left themselves open to accepting a Canada-style deal, and that is really encouraging.
Very good, very good. There's a gentleman right at the back there who's been trying to get in all right from the beginning.
In the event of no deal, how will Brexiteers stop a potential hijack by Remainers to at the very least call for a second referendum and at the most reverse the decision taken by the British public in 2016?
I'm doing this because I can hear the question, which is always an advantage. Well, actually, for most politicians, it isn't, because you give the same answer regardless. But the question, in case everybody didn't hear it, was that if we go for no deal, will that offer a chance for Remainers to have a second referendum or stop Brexit? I don't think so, because I think there simply isn't a timetable for it. That you would need to get legislation through for a second referendum, you'd need to suspend Article 50, and you would need to get the statutory instrument through to delay the implementation of the Withdrawal Act, all before the 29th of March 2019. Now, if we get to the 29th of March 2019, and we've left, and the Remainers say, well, let's have a referendum to go back in, that completely changes things under Article 50, because then we are applying as if we had never been a member. And then the referendum would say we would have to join the Euro and Schengen, because all our opt-outs would be gone. And I'm not sure that there are many people in this country who would vote to join the Euro and be parts of Schengen. Even Nick Clegg might be hard pushed to do that. So all we've got to do is hold our nerve until the 29th of March and make sure that nothing gets through Parliament that can stop Brexit. And I think that is extremely difficult considering the numbers and the balance in the House of Commons. So it's steady, boys, steady.
The gentleman here.
That's the technical answer I would have given had I heard the question.
Hello? Hi, I'm Nick Simon. Theresa May seems to have her heart set on this disastrous Chequers plan. How can we at the conference get Chequers chucked?
The Prime Minister has set out her plan, and it's won no support from anybody. At one point I thought it had the support of the Downing Street cat. Now friends of the Downing Street cat say that his mind is wavering. He's much keener on Super Canada. Now, ultimately political reality breaks in. And to be fair to the Prime Minister, she has made an effort to get somewhere that the EU might accept and that deals with the Northern Ireland border, and she is a committed and passionate unionist. And I admire that because I think the integrity of our country is a genuine priority for us. I will make a confession amongst this distinguished group that had I thought that voting to leave the European Union might have led Scotland to vote to leave the more precious union, it is the one thing that might have made me change my mind. The union is our country, and the Prime Minister is defending that in the way she thinks best. I disagree with her, but I don't think that makes her dishonourable or bad or not deserving of my support and trust. But how do we stop Chequers? Well, the EU doesn't like it, Eurosceptics won't vote for it, pro-Europeans don't like it, and the Labour Party don't like it. Doesn't leave a lot of support.
The gentleman at the side there.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? 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 Can you hear me? Jacob, can I just ask you, how can you trust a Prime Minister that's working behind the scenes, all right, not telling her Brexit secretary what's going on? And that's my question, right? This
I certainly think that what went on in Downing Street, drawing up a paper in secret without telling the Brexit secretary, was what one might call a constitutional novelty. And I'm not enormously keen on constitutional novelties, but I think the Tory party often thinks that the easy solution is to change the leader, and actually changing leader usually causes more problems than it solves. And therefore it is, in my mind, sensible and prudent to back the Prime Minister and to allow her to go back to what she said, because there's so much on Brexit that the Prime Minister has said that we all support. And it's as if Chequers is an aberration, and it came slightly out of the blue, it was all done in secret, it suddenly appeared. Let it now disappear, and then we can all be happy.
Okay, time for 2 more questions. Gentleman here with the beard. Yeah.
Can you hear me? No? No. Okay, do my best.
Sorry?
Anyone who has ever conducted a serious negotiation in a business context, or as I do in the context of trying to settle legal disputes, knows that unless you are willing to walk away, you will not get a good deal or even an acceptable deal. And that is the situation we're now facing with Brussels, I would suggest. And what we should do now, I would suggest, is to walk away and to stay away until they are willing to talk to us on a reasonable and constructive basis. On a reasonable and constructive basis which respects our sovereignty and our democracy and treats us as an equal.
I think that what you've articulated is exactly the way most things would be negotiated in a business or on any sort of private purchase. It has to be the right answer for the country, surrounded in diplomacy. I've personally felt after many years of running a business that it doesn't pay to posture. A lot of people who haven't been in business think it's worth posturing. I think it's best to set out your stall. This is what we're going to do. We're going to move to tariff-free, or mostly tariff-free, on the 29th of March. We like you guys. We want to do a trade deal with you, but that's up to you. It's a must for us to reclaim our fishing. Set out your stall in a nice way. Be pleasant. Open for business, like Europeans, which we do as people. And but then be prepared to walk away. You don't have to posture or be tough, but you have to be prepared to walk away.
All right. Last question.
A question from an educated person from the fishing industry. Why 2 years ago today, I think it was 2 years ago today, the Prime Minister said the acquis will come into domestic legislation. Why? What I can't understand is that does not make it compatible once we have left, unless there's going to be a new treaty. And if there's a new treaty, it changes the whole ball game, because it brings in the convention, the Vienna Convention. And that was exactly 2 years ago, and that's never been answered.
Okay, so that was quite a technical question about fishing and about the Vienna Convention coming into force as a consequence of taking into the acquis into UK law.
There are so many complex issues around the Vienna Convention and how it applies to the interpretations. The Vienna Convention, 1968, on the interpretation of treaties and how treaties that you have with other countries apply. The bringing of the acquis into domestic law is a sensible thing to do, because it means the day after we've left, our law is certain and set. but that we then have the ability to change that law as a matter of domestic politics according to votes in Parliament. So it maintains the status quo, but it leaves it completely open to ordinary change, as long as we don't have checkers, which would mean it wasn't possible to change. I think the issue relating to the acquis and fishing and the Vienna Convention is the pre-established rights that relate to the 1960s agreement that we had with European fishing boats to allow them into UK waters. As I understand it, we have given formal notice that that treaty is being ended, as we're allowed to do under that treaty, so that that will have ended by the time and will coincide with the time which we leave the European Union. And so I think that will allow us to set our own determination on fishing, and I think that's really important. My constituency is landlocked. I don't have a fishing community in North East Somerset. That's true of most constituencies in the country. They don't have a fishing community, and our fishing community is small. But all of us feel this extraordinary connection to the fishing communities because they paid the price of joining the European Union in the first place. And they were the sacrificial lamb to allow us to enter. And my vision of our nation is a united kingdom of one people. And if something affects the fishermen in Grimsby, that is a matter of concern to me in North East Somerset. It's what Edmund Burke said: we are not ambassadors from hostile nations joining together in Parliament. We are representatives of one country. And what is bad for Grimsby is bad for North East Somerset. And I want to see fishing put at the forefront of the revitalisation that we can have once we've left the European Union. And I happen to think it's particularly exciting for Scotland, because Scotland has the bulk of the UK's fishing waters, and it could become a really important part of the Scottish economy again. And that reinforces the union that we care about, rather than the one that we're desperate to leave.
All right. Thank you. So, there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have to draw it to a close now. I'm sure you'd like to show your appreciation finally to our panel of speakers who've done a fantastic job, and also thank you for coming along and asking such erudite questions.